Hello and welcome to this edition of Soulful Scrutiny. Joining me tonight via Skype from the country of St. Vincent and the Grenadines is activist Luzette King. Ms. King has been in St. Vincent at least for 15 months following the general elections there in 2015, December 9th to be precise. After the election, the opposition and many of the people in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, including Ms. King, have declared the elections not to be free and fair. There were allegations of electoral fraud, and since then the opposition has filed a claim in the courts, a petition in the courts, and Ms. King has been protesting with a group of people in front of the electoral office. She has vowed that she is not leaving St. Vincent and the Grenadines until this matter has been rectified and democracy has been restored, because she is saying that people have voted and they should be expected to get what they voted for. Good day and good night, I should say, and welcome to Soulful Scrutiny, Luzette.
Good evening.
Okay. I just give a synopsis, kind of a brief thing of who you are. So just tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into the interview.
A little bit about myself. I am so many in one that I'm not quite sure what it is you'd like to know. But for this,
try your best.
For the purpose of what we're doing, I started my working life as a supernumerary teacher in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, specifically from the Marengo Valley. And then I went to England when I was very young and spent 2.5 years there. And during those 24.5 years, I became a nurse. Well, I went there to do nursing. And towards the end, I left nursing and became active as a politician in one council and an officer in the other. And before I did that, though, I practiced midwifery. During those years, I spent about 4 years doing midwifery. And during those years, I became aware of what racism is. So because of what was happening at the time, I single-handedly revived a midwives' union to challenge what was happening in the hospital that I was working. Long story short, at the peak of that activity, I applied for a job in a local borough and for a position in what they called the Equal Opportunities Unit.
An Equal Opportunity Unit, okay.
Yeah, before that it was race relations. Now this particular authority was found guilty by the government of racism in its service delivery and employment practices. And so the unit that I joined was to help the local authority to change its ways, to ensure that all its constituents, all the residents of that borough, were treated fairly. Now, in that borough, there were people from all over the world, but predominantly people from the Caribbean and the Turkish people from Turkey. So I had a very good, I spent 6 years doing that actually. And so I became very acutely aware of injustices. It be race or gender, I became acutely aware. And so that's been part of my life, a major part of it.
So you've been an activist for a while?
Yes.
Okay. So now let's jump forward. So you were recent before this setup in St. Vincent. After the election, you were living here in the United States. So I assume at some point you moved from England to the United States.
Yes. Around 1999.
Okay.
I moved from England to the United States where my family lived. So I moved because I changed careers naturally, as I told you before. And I wanted to pursue studies in international relations and master's level and maybe PhD level. But I had a shock of my life when I discovered how expensive education was in England, in
the United States,
when compared to the United Kingdom. But I also wanted to join my family. My parents were getting older, and I just thought it was an opportunity to join just after my studies. So
you came to the United States. So now let's fast forward a bit. What happened? How did you happen to be in St. Vincent? How did you come to be in St. Vincent and the Grenadines? And take us from there and tell us how you got to be where you are today in that island, standing up for this injustice that you say is happening there regarding the ULP, which is Unity Labour Party, the ruling party in the party in power. Take us there.
Right. Well, I can't just take you there without giving you some background to it. As I said, I was very active as a politician and trade unionist, mind you. And so part of my interest was St. Vincent and the Grenadines and what was happening there with respect to women, because one of my portfolio as a politician was a chair of the Women's Committee. And so I wanted to know what was happening in St. Vincent and Grenadines, because at the time, Yvonne Francis Gibson was responsible for that unit. We did have a women's unit, or its equivalent in St. Vincent. And so I was trying to get best practices from all over, including St. Vincent. And so because I was involved, I also kept track of what was happening politically. At the time, the New Democratic Party was there for some, at the time when I got involved, it was about 10 or 15 years. And I really didn't like some of the arrogance that the politicians had, developed. And so the Unity Labour Party came about as an alternative. I read their manifesto, the Constitution, liked it, liked what they were saying, and so I joined them.
And you joined the ULP, the Unity Labour Party, the party that's now in power. Okay.
While I was in England, mind you. I actually helped set up what we call, I think it was a ULP support. And around about 1998, when they lost that election, I think it was the first time they really got close to power, I was part of getting in the newspaper an advert urging Vincentians to give the Unity Labour Party a chance.
So you were once a stunt supporter? Okay.
Yes. And a staunch supporter because what they were preaching, both in terms of the Constitution and the manifesto, was akin to the very same things that I was advocating for in the United Kingdom. So it was just natural. I thought they were socialist leaning, and I have to say too, and I hope it was clear that to become a politician in England, you had an active one. You had to be a member of one of the political parties, and so I was of the Labour Party, the British Labour Party, which is a sister party to the ULP and all the others in the region, Jamaica Labour Party and so on. As I said, I joined them and became active. But even before the first election that they won in 2001, I had become very concerned at some of the things I was seeing and hearing from them, because now I'm inside, so to speak. And one of the things that caught my attention and disturbed me was the way they were dealing with an ambassador, the way they were joining with others to castigate this guy. And it was purely political. And I raised my concerns then, and I warned them that I will not be a part of any regime that was continuing the very things we were challenging come from the New Democratic
So the New Democratic Party, the old wing of it, had been in power for some while, and as most parties, when they've been in power for too long, they become kind of arrogant. So you were then in the ULP, but now you're seeing some things with the ULP that is counter to what you they were preaching and why you joined them in the first place.
Okay. Even before the first the 2001 election. Yeah. And so it wasn't long after I actually fell out with them publicly, because, and a lot of people are saying it's because I didn't get what I want, but no. I was among the first to be victimized.
How so?
My position.
How so?
Well, to start, and you would hear people say this too, I was encouraged by many in the party to come to Washington, D.C. because they thought I'd be able to help them promote what they stood for, and that I did. I was overlooked, but even that didn't bother me so much, to the extent that I did have the ambassador then, and we're talking about 2001, 2002, and even 3. I helped others form an active Vincentian community aligned to the embassy. And while I was doing that, and you know, we were very, very successful. We had different committees, and I remember one was a social committee where we were trying to get people out socially. And one evening, there was so much rain and thunder that we thought people would, but they did. And that demonstrated that there was a need for Vincentians to get to know one another. What happened, I went out of my way and I applied for a job that suited what I had just studied, which was international law, public international law. And I focused on the United Nations and its agencies. And so I applied for this job as a trade officer, and there was also a senior trade officer. The ambassador encouraged me to apply for both jobs. Long story short, I had them fly me, the OECS that was. They paid my fares to St. Lucia, where I was interviewed, got a job, signed a contract, and everything else. And I made a dreadful mistake of kind of trying to report my progress, and I was shut down.
Wow. But shut down by who?
Ralph Gonzalez.
Wow.
I heard him.
So you're his supporter. At this point, you're one of his supporters.
Yes.
Okay.
I did hear him. He didn't call my name, but he referred to me. And I want to say on record, Ralph Gonzalez is one of the biggest liars I ever knew. He had nothing to do with deciding whether I was suitable or not. The people who were responsible for vetting my experience and what have you had decided that I was suitable for the job, and I had a contract that was signed, but they concocted a story that they didn't have any money, you know, and that job was subject to them having funding and everything else. Unfortunately for them, and I wouldn't call names, but there were a lot of key people holding key positions, who knew what was happening and told me every single thing that was going on behind the scenes.
To block you. To block you. Okay.
To block me. Yes. And long story short, I decided, okay, this is crazy. We got rid of the New Democratic Party because there were allegations of them spiting people, politically, victimizing.
And that did go on in that old wing of that party. Yeah, that did go on.
And here I am, having stood on the side of the Unity Labour Party, who promised to not only well, try to get rid of that kind of politics.
Mm-hmm. So they run on that the NDP is the old NDP was, and let me make it clear, not the current guys that are in office, because most of these guys had nothing to do with that leg of the party back then. But they run on the fact that the old arm of the NDP, I still don't know why they still keep that name, but right, they were spiteful, they were in there too long, and they were victimizing people, and now here you're saying that they're here now victimizing you, who was a supporter.
Right. If you notice, nearly always, and I don't know why this happens, but anything that's happening, where either it's good or bad, it focuses on the leader. Before the New Democratic Party, it was Milton Cato who tear gas the teachers, beat them up, threw them in cells. You know, people don't talk about the ones who actually carry out these atrocities. And so with the New Democratic Party, it was James Mitchell who was spiteful, you know, and everything else. Now it is Ralph Gonsalves, who is spiteful and vindictive and that sort of thing. And so I decided then that come what may, never mind what I go through, I am going to ensure, just like I did in England, I am going to do all I can within my power to address the issue of injustice. And so when I left Washington, D.C. in 2015, a week before the elections, I went home expecting to have a new regime. I want no job from anybody. I just wanted to see us change our way of doing things. And as you know, that did not happen. I had no plans of staying, but just what happened, I decided, come what may, I am going to sacrifice as much as I can to ensure that I am a part of getting rid of this illegitimate regime. I mean, it didn't take us long to know that they were stealing the elections.
So let's get into that a little bit. So there were cries of fraud in the election, and that is why they are now in the courts trying to straighten this out. They were in Central Leeward, that district, as well as in North Windward. There have been cries, and there were other irregularities regarding the election. So now you're on the ground, and these things are happening. The election, the country is up in arms. There are big protests, and you said you made a decision at that point to say, I'm going to stay here until this is corrected. Am I correcting?
Right. I did think the initial uprising was appropriate and it suited the time, but unfortunately, on the 14th of, well, just before the 14th, a few days before that, there was some marching for a few days, and then that protest was called off. I didn't think it was because after all, so many people didn't know what they were going to eat for that Christmas. And so I decided, okay, the politicians don't want to come out. I'm not a politician, but I'm a concerned citizen, and I will continue to protest. And so, but the thing is, I don't even know how I became the leader that people see me as. I really don't know. I just decided I was going to protest.
So you really saw an injustice then, being someone with your background. You're saying you just couldn't just turn back and come back to New York, and the United States rather. We saw, you just mentioned the protests. We saw the country erupt in protest immediately after the December 2015 elections. There was some arrests, and eventually people retreated back to their normal way of life, never to be heard from again. But you continued the protests in front of the electoral office. And I remember one case where I saw the police officers arrested you. You were not causing any mischief. You were just protesting, as it is people's, citizens' democratic right to protest. And you were dragged. I remember this young police officer dragging you, and a mature woman, and your clothes were practically being pulled off of you. And I thought how disrespectful these young men, you could be their mother. Many of them, most of them that I saw, they could be your sons. And you got arrested. I believe you were detained overnight. Were you?
No.
You were not. Okay. But I remember when they released you, that you went right back in the picket line, and somebody said to you, you are such a hero, and you said something to the effect, I'm not a hero, I'm just an ordinary woman. But you went right back. What made you so different from the average Vincentian, who just seemed to, they protest for a little bit and then they cower and they retreat? But you kept going, and still 15 months later, you're still going.
Well,
what make you sustain this? And how are you able to sustain this?
I explained to you initially how I deal with injustice of any time.
Right.
And let me just divert a little bit. A friend of mine, and I believe she supports the Unity Labour Party. Why I say this, she will come to see me. I know her from school days. We met in England afterwards, and we were quite close actually. She would come on the picket line and she would give me some money, and she said, look, this is for you. Don't buy nothing for nobody else. So I suspect she is. But you know, one of the things she said to me one day, she said, Luzette, if you didn't do this, you wouldn't be Luzette, she said. And she explained that when we were in school and she did anything wrong, anything to anybody, and she saw me coming, she would run. And she said, yes, because you're going to say, why you do that? And so I just, on that day, when they lifted me and took me into the thing, and I'm not going to say too much about it because it's still in court.
Right.
I sat there in the station, upstairs, mind you, and I've since discovered that they took me upstairs because most people believe that the ULP supporters are in CID and most of the NDP supporters are downstairs. So, charged with a traffic offense, I don't see how I got upstairs in the criminal investigation department.
Wow. So you were arrested, you're charged with a traffic offense, but you were taken to a criminal unit.
But I have to say to you, no, let me not go there. Yes, they took me in there. Took them a while before they actually came and laid this charge on me, and I kind of just watching them smiling. I was as calm as anything. The only time I was disturbed is when one of my attorneys came to see me, and she said, Luzette, did you see that photograph of them stripping you? And I thought, oh my God, what happened here? And I said no, and she proceeded to show me that photograph.
So you weren't even conscious of this, how this was happening?
I nearly died. All I saw, because I come from a very reserved family, I'm the only tearaway. I just saw my sister and my brothers and everybody looking at this thing. That's the only thing that disturbed me. But once I got over that, I also knew that it was an attempt to intimidate me and to intimidate the others. And so when they asked me to sign this bail thing, I said, I'm not signing anything. The police said to me with a smile, well, if you don't sign, we can't let you go. So I said, okay, no harm done. So I signed, and as soon as he let me out, I just ran. I didn't walk. I ran because I wanted to demonstrate. None of you would intimidate me. I was also scared that if I were intimidated to the point where I would retreat. I was fearful that the women who were there with me would do this. And I just couldn't let them down. I wanted to demonstrate to them, after all, this is our right. We have the right to protest without interference. Because we weren't doing anything.
I mean, you're exercising your democratic right to be able to, in a free country, in a country that's democratic, it is not illegal to protest. So I didn't quite understand that. So you're in front of the electoral office. Why the electoral office? I mean, I think I kind of know the answer, but I still want you to explain that. Why that spot as opposed to in front of the financial complex?
I don't think you know the answer. I'll tell you why you don't know the answer.
I think, but I don't know.
I did not know it was the electoral office.
Okay. See, I didn't know the answer, right?
As I told you, there was a protest before I continued. And I saw people gather there and calling out the name of the supervisor of elections. And then, okay, here is where it's at. And so I decided, you know, when I was demonstrating on my own, especially on Christmas Day, I spent the day with my relatives in Kingstown because I wanted to, well, I was there Christmas Eve night because that family again, they asked me to come and spend Christmas with them because it's usual that once I'm there I'll do that. And I got up the morning very early, had a shower, dressed, and sat at the breakfast table, had breakfast, and my auntie said to me, Luzette, where are you going? I said, I'm going at the protest line. Oh no, Luzette, don't do that today. I said, it's like any other day, I'm going. So I picked up a few, you know, bits of cake and what have you, and went down, and I was joined by one other person on Christmas Day. I was there Boxing Day, and I just continued. Right.
So now that your Christmas stopped, you know, you mentioned about, you know, if anything, you had a fear that if. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Let me do that. Let me explain why Christmas Day stopped me. The 2001 election was in March, right? Good. 2005, 2010, 2015 were December. I worked it out that when they performed the shenanigans, right? Even if people protest because of the nature of our people and the culture, when Christmas comes, they forget about everything. They will go home, have their Christmas meals, whether it's ham or, you know, the usual things.
Right.
And it's a season of goodwill and da-da-da. And December would come and they would forget about it. I believe those December elections were deliberate. And I also believe it was a plot and an expectation that people will forget about the atrocities. And so this is why I decided not even Christmas will stop me.
Okay. You mentioned about the only thing that you were fearful of is if you back down that the ladies would get the wrong impression. But in this country of recent times, there's a fear that's gripping that nation where people are afraid to speak out. You know, if you go there and you're talking, you don't want to, you know, and you're as someone who I grew up there and I lived there for 20 years of my life, and I've always been going back. I never in my life thought I would see St. Vincent, of all places, be reduced to that. So I think whether you agree with what you're doing or disagree, whether you're ULP or the NDP, I'm neither. I think one has to admire your courage. What has been the high point of your stay on St. Vincent and the Grenadines? And conversely, what has been your lowest points?
The highest point for me is when they arrested us and Mr. Eustace, Annie Eustace, called me and asked me what had happened, and I explained to him. And he immediately called out the troops, so to speak. And Mr. Eustace, without fear, he demonstrated no fear when he stood in the front of a crowd of people, and police with tear gas and their shields and batons and everything else went towards him, and he did not move. He just went towards them. That was one of the highest points for me. Here is a man, unlike the other, who asked for human shield when he thought he was faced with danger. He didn't think he could face the wrath of the authorities. He asked for human beings to form a shield around him. And Eustace did not.
He also said in one of his speech where one of his supporters literally took a baton that was meant for him.
That's correct. That's the Calypsonian Knight. The police went for him, and they caught him at his side. He suffered pain, and there was another person, Sappy, who got by the police.
I remember when I think he got his ribs broken or something like that. If it's the person I'm thinking about.
Yes, Sappy, yeah.
Right. What have been your low points?
My low point, it's more a period of frustration that our people, especially women, and you say earlier they don't speak out, they do, but they speak out at one another. They take out their frustration. But when it comes to addressing the real oppressor, they don't speak. And that is the part that really, it does depress me. But my friend Patches Knights once sort of bring me back to earth when he said that you are an unusual person. You have to have some patience. I don't accept that I'm unusual, but I do accept that I'm different. And so, and I've been exposed as well. And so I have to be patient and I just kind of let things go now. And just let people develop on their own. I do my best to set my own standards. And whoever wants to follow them, if not.
Well, some people have referred to you as the Caribbean Rosa Parks, including myself. What do you say to that? That's some big company.
While I'm grateful and I'm humble, I try to stay away from it. I'm simply Luzette King. And the reason I insist on that is because you don't have to be a hero to stand up for your rights. And if you feel the pain of oppression, if you feel the pain of discrimination, if that pain is strong enough, trust me, you don't have to be a hero. And I think to give me a name like that, you kind of give the impression to others that, and they say, I can't be like that. It's not so.
So you're saying if people start putting this kind of heroic thing on it, Rosa Parks, then ordinary folks think I can't really aspire to be that, because I'm not, yes.
I want to be seen as an ordinary person. And I tell you something, that the extent at which I go to depict an ordinary person. If you notice, I said very little about my training, apart from me being a nurse. But studying has been a lifelong thing for me. You would never find me putting an initial behind my name. And I can a lot if I chose to. But I don't. Because if you're going to talk on behalf or try to empower people, the last thing you want to do is have them be in awe of you all the time. I am not saying I'm an angel, I'm not saying I'm the best, but I try to be simple and to be at the same level of those people against whom these injustices are conducted against.
Now, you and your group, actually, you sleep there sometimes. You literally have slept at the protest site.
On Tuesday night, and this week, Tuesday night, was the night of the day that we got the news. The night before, the Monday, we stayed until late because we just, I mean, that's another thing. You have something as big as this, and Tom was dead. So a few of us stayed up on Monday night. I went home and I got some snacks, and we were having coffee with pink salmon, tin pink salmon, biscuits, and that sort of thing. I had about 2 hours sleep, and of course went through the day on Tuesday, went through almost the whole night on Tuesday night, and by Wednesday, which was about 48 hours, I had about 2 hours sleep, 2 or 3 hours sleep.
So, okay, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm doing these out of the ordinary things to catch people's attention. Look, we are under siege. This regime is illegitimate. The thief election. This is not right. I mean, if you can't even rely on your vote to decide who governs you, you might as well die.
So what do you say about the victory that was just, at least in part, it's a victory in part, it's a false start for the petitions? Is there hope there?
Right. That victory is a victory, and I think I heard the Honorable Dr. Godwin Friday say this. It's a victory for St. Vincent, and I agree. It is a victory for every Vincentian, even those who don't see it as such. Because at the heart of this is a blow to our democracy.
Right.
Okay, the ULP supporters might be benefiting now, but let's say the NDP goes in, and you don't have the lives of the ones who are standing there now. Or if they want to change and do a similar thing to what the ULP is doing now. You understand?
Right.
They won't stand up.
Well, you see, that's the thing. People look at this, like everything there is divided along party lines, and people don't realize we are a nation, and what affects, you know, when your neighbor house is on fire, you got to wet yours, because, you know.
It is for that very reason that I do not ever respond to those people who castigate me and say all manner of things about me on radio or wherever. Somebody called me this morning. Luzette, somebody said on the radio and called a name that they must clean up Kingston, especially Luzette because it stinks. He did not say I was stink. But the implication is I am stink. I will never, ever, ever respond to something like that.
It's not worth it. Don't dignify it with an answer.
But it's not only that, it's beyond that. Each of those individuals who are castigating me, especially those of my color, they are victims of the oppressor that I am targeting. So why should I then turn around and fight with victims like myself? An African friend told me some years ago, never blame the victims.
So you see, even those that are supporting the ULP as being victims, they just don't really realize how much they're being victimized.
The difference between them and me, they are favored and I am not.
This is a country that I don't know if I said most, but in a country that some people call a family dynasty, where people are arrested for even allegedly saying things on Facebook. And like I mentioned earlier, a lot of people are sort of cowering in this kind of fearful way. What do you have any words for people that you know, in terms of fear, because I always feel like anytime you start to succumb to fear, you may as well just, like, you know, get the coffin. You don't have to have anybody do anything to you. Get the coffin, lie in it, and just tell them to throw some sand over you. You know, what do you have to say to, because fear, that kind of fear is crippling. It is a crippling thing. So what do you have to say to those people who are so afraid to fight what they see as a family dynasty, where one family or one group of people make the law, is the law, do whatever, not really caring about, you know, what, you know, other people, and even some people, what is perceived or real, are worried about some kind of impending danger. What do you have to say to the people who are crippled with this fear, real or imagined?
There's hardly anything I can say that would change their attitude, because there is a concerted effort to keep people dumb. Dumb in the sense that they're ignorant. And when I say ignorant, I'm not saying it that they don't have any sense, but they don't know their rights. And even if you don't know your rights, Trish, one of the things which many moving centuries would do is stay away from the personal attacks. When you attack, or most of the time you attack people personally, you're going to say things that you can't prove. Mm-hmm. If you deal with the issues, nearly always it's something that you feel, something that you see, or others can see. Alright? Mm-hmm. And you make sure that you have evidence of it. Nobody can say that the Unity Labour Party is not a regime under which people can't eat. People have lost their jobs. They've been discriminated against. They've been subjected to a hardship that we've never seen in this country, not since emancipation, I believe, and certainly not independence. So if we want to focus more on issues and avoid the personal attacks, you know, we would be a better nation, and people would be able to speak freely.
It is often said that changes do not come about without a revolution of some sort. Are you confident that this revolution that you're fighting will bring about the changes that you're seeking?
Well, because of the flippant use of the term revolution, I hope what I'm doing here is not seen as such in the context.
Well, not in terms of guns and that sort of thing, but
no,
just any kind of fighting for change.
No, what I'm saying, and I'll be more explicit, the flippant use of revolution, the health revolution, education revolution, that revolution, all kinds of revolutions happening under this Unity Labour Party. I would rather the activities with which I'm involved is not seen as such in this context.
What would you call it? What would you call it?
I just see it as
a movement?
A resistance against oppression. And that for me is necessary when you consider some of the things our foreparents have gone through, especially those who helped bring about adult suffrage in 1951. This is not new.
But some people might say, Luzette, you live in America, a country with much privilege. You have a life here. I am assuming you're a mom. Are you a mom? Are you a mother?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so you're a mother. And probably even a grandmother. Are you a grandmother? So
no.
But you're a mother. So some people may say, why do you care so much? You don't even live there. Just leave that godforsaken place. Because you know what? Most of these Caribbean islands, they have some kind of corruption. They are basically birds of a feather. Most of them have some kind of, so why care? Why do you care? So what do you say about that?
Having lived in England and America for decades, and visited other places, there is none like St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I know of times when I lived in America and England, especially England, people saved their money to come home to enjoy the goodness there, the culture, the food, the music and everything. And as many of us lived our lives with a dream to come back home. You understand? When you look at what's happening now globally, I believe, and I made this, I came to this conclusion in 1995 or thereabouts. When I went to Africa, I attended the 7th Pan-African Congress. And I saw there and in St. Vincent and Grenadines that sooner or later, everybody would be flocking to Africa and to the Caribbean for a decent way of life. What we have between us and that decent way of life is corrupt politicians like the ones we have in the ULP. Look at what's happening in America. And as a nurse, in America you can't even afford to die. You live in America and you work just to pay bills, and you build a house and you only sleep in it because you're out of it more than you're in to pay the bills. I want a St. Vincent and the Grenadines to decide whether I come back here and live a life of luxury. And you don't have to have money to live a life of luxury.
Well, the thing is, most of us as Vincentians, I can't speak for other islands, but most of us do not come to these parts to die here. We may die here, but we're not looking to die here. Like, I don't hope to die here. But my children are American. They may bring me back from St. Vincent when I get to a stage where I can't take care of myself. And I must say I'm a bit troubled with some of the things that I'm seeing there. Because I own, I have family there, I have property there. And, like you and many others, I always intended to go back there to retire. And I can't say that right now I'm confident that I want to do that. And it's not that I don't want to do it, but it's at least much to be desired for what I'm seeing there. Now, this must have been, there's a cost for everything that we do. What has been the cost to you, emotionally and financially? Let's take the financial thing first.
Before I go to that, and it would fit in the financial, I have had time to reflect on what's happening in St. Vincent and to visit places, especially Kanawha and Trish. Because we are a small population of some 100,000 or so, the resources in St. Vincent, if harnessed properly, every one of us, as long as we work diligently, we can all be well off. Do you understand what I'm saying? Now, the cost for me, emotionally, I have a very close family, and although some of them don't like what I'm doing, they know, they understand it, so they leave me alone. But emotionally, today, tomorrow, if I really felt so drained, I can always pick up the phone and speak to one or two of my siblings. I'm one of 6. You understand? I am from a very supportive family. Financially, that too is the same. And I do not live a life of luxury. I've never been an extravagant person. So
you're a simple person. So this is not a great deviation.
It's easy to live. It's easy to live. You understand what I'm saying? I don't have to have a new suit. In fact, I don't even like shopping. I don't like it. I think it's a waste of time, and more than that, you go in the stores, especially nowadays, and you hardly find something of quality that you can put on your back. So while I'm here, I will get a friend to make some clothes for me and so on. Financially, A lot of it comes from friends and my own resources. But as I say, I don't need a lot to live by.
So that perhaps is the key behind how this was successful, because you're not looking for a lot. You'd say, you know, basically, I think you take, it sounds to me like you're taking the approach that, you know what, I'm going to do whatever I need to do and adjust whatever I need to adjust to do this.
Yes.
Am I correct in saying that?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So let me just sum things up before we come to a close. Basically, you're in St. Vincent, you're protesting, because we're looking in St. Vincent, we're seeing what seems to be this kind of spitefulness from the ruling party. They're a favored group, they're favored people, and if you're favored, then everything is okay. Try to sum this up. If you're not, you are being, there's spite going on. There's a lot of spitefulness. And they run on this very thing, and that was the very issue that kind of drew you to support that party. And now they empower them. Someone said, I don't remember the person, who said they have made the ills of the NDP look like child's play compared to what people are seeing now. We've seen where a teacher, Luzette, was pulled out of her classroom in front of her students and arrested because she was alleged to have said something on Facebook. There was Paul Scrubber, Vincentian-born singer who was living here in the United States, went back on vacation. He was there for 5 weeks. Nobody arrested him. When he was leaving, they pulled him. They arrested him as he was getting ready to board his plane to come back to New York. And he was prevented, his travel documents were seized, because I'm taking it he's not a U.S. citizen, at least was not at the time. And he was prevented from leaving. For 3 months, this man with a family, with a job, and he's had to come back and build his life, and that was thrown out. Josette's case, if I'm not mistaken, was thrown out as well. We see Dougie DeFreitas. I did an interview with him, and that should be airing soon. He tells of the trials that he's had to go through. And even with his case, because he was arrested as well, right after the 2015 election, it's just been moved. It's from Kingston to Bayaboo to this place. It's like send the fool a little farther type of thing. I imagine that probably would be thrown out. Ben Exeter, the representative for Central Leeward, one of the contested seat, or the seat that people are saying the fraudulent activity occur, he's been arrested in his case, and another young man, Shabazz, I think his name is, they were eventually dropped. So you see the set of the arrest, and then they're dropped because they have no basis. Now, how do you prove that somebody said something on Facebook? People try to pretend they're my friends every day and try to send friend requests to me. And you have Canada, a little island, a little Grenadine island, a tourist mecca, where the people, the natives there, cannot access their own beach. My understanding is the beach, up to a certain amount of feet onto the beach, is free and public. But they have put a barricade, and these people are not allowed to go onto the beach. They have find ways to kind of climb in or come in. And Mr. Bino, Terrence Bino, I believe he was arrested. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he lost his job. And the Prime Minister, who ran on certain principles, have been silent for the most part about what's going on. And nothing has been done to rectify that situation. We have, people being split among party line. Everything is politics. ULP, NDP, ULP, NDP. Not on principle. I can understand what you're fighting for. You're standing on principle. Whether people agree with what you're saying or not, you're standing against something. You're saying, I'm going to stand my ground. But in that country, everything is about one party versus the other. Everything is split along party line. And I see a good leader, or a strong leader, as someone who wants to bring their people together, not encourage this kind of great divide. I think many people felt that whether there was election fraud or not, that there are people that believe there was, and we have yet to see actually what's in court. And most people would have said, if you're coming into a situation like this where people believe that there was fraudulent activities, right? There were fraudulent activities, and you're now in office, that there would have been a more conciliatory note to a tone, I should say, to the Prime Minister's way of talking and acting. But what many saw was a kind of pompous, arrogant kind of thumb in your nose, you know. That's how most people see it. So there's a great divide in this country. There is much turmoil. It is, in many people's opinion, been reduced to not even a shell of what it used to be. What happened to me during the U.S. 2016 election, when I realized that Donald Trump had won, and the climate that was permeating in the United States. And I always looked at St. Vincent as home. This has become home to me now. But St. Vincent would always be my homeland. And there's always a love and a caring, a deep caring for St. Vincent. I know that there are many times when I go, there are very few times I go and I don't cry when I'm leaving. Because I'm so sad, I don't want to leave. I can't wait, you know, it's always been my thing, I can't wait to go back to retire. And just live a simple life. I'm very much like you in a lot of ways. But that was when it hit me that I didn't have this paradise to go back to. I could go back there, but I didn't have this paradise to go back to because I don't know that I like that any better than I like what's going on here. Because I feel at least there are some things being done to fight things here. In St. Vincent, I don't know what's going on there. And I see this great divide that really saddens me. You know, I have a program that I do there with the children. And you will never see me discriminate against people based on who drive. When I have the drivers or the people who work in the kitchen, I don't care who you are. As long as you do a good job, I really couldn't care less about that sort of thing. But I don't know what the answer is. There's this great divide. There's this great fear, this sadness, this depressing thing that's coming over this country, that country of my birth, and I don't know what the answer is. But as we're getting ready to wrap up this interview, do you have any regrets? If you could go right back to December 2015, before you set foot on St. Vincent and the Grenadines, do you have any regrets? Would you have done anything differently?
None whatsoever. None. Absolutely none. And I want to touch on a few things that you mentioned. First of all, you listed some of the people who have been lynched by this regime, Unity Labour Party regime, headed by Ralph Gonsalves. But cannot get away from the fact that the most egregious one here is bigamy. And that in itself needs another kind of discussion, because if you were to quiz me for bigger bigs, the case of bigger bigs is what actually drove me to start any form of active protest against this regime.
And okay, go ahead.
The other point I want to make is that I will not call Ralph Gonsalves a prime minister. I'll tell you why. We have a serious problem of robbery and theft and that sort of thing. And if we are saying that the Unity Labour Party stole their way to power, then why do you reward them by calling any one of them prime minister? You don't. It's like stolen goods, benefiting from stolen goods, and I don't believe in that. So for me, we do not have a prime minister anyway, and certainly not a legitimate one. So if he is deemed prime minister, we must add the word illegitimate. After all, 2 of the 15 seats are questioned. And yet he stays in power and doing all sorts of atrocities, waging atrocities against Vincentians, knowingly that his position is illegitimate. So if we call him a prime minister at all, put the word illegitimate before it.
So you're saying that basically St. Vincent is a country in limbo because in your opinion there is not a legitimate prime minister.
The election is not over, even when he took midnight nearly to get sworn in and he talked his way. No, he is illegitimate. election of 2015 is still outstanding. It is not over.
Now, you mentioned Bigger Big, so I'm just going to quickly tell the audience. He is a gentleman who had a contract in business. I think he would build blocks, cement blocks. And he employed some 60 people. And in a small country of 110,000 people, that's a significant number. And it is said that he has been driven out of business by the guns and victimized by the Gonzalez administration. And you have been one of the people who have defended him. So just want to give them that background of who he is and so forth.
And Trish, if he were just building blocks, I think they would have left him alone. He had a sand mining business.
Okay.
Which is equivalent to an oil, what do you call it? What do you call those?
Oil wells.
An oil mine. Right? And that is what was upsetting some of them at the helm of this regime. Building blocks, they would not have bothered him.
But it was more extensive than that. Now, there's some people, Luzette, who say that the Prime Minister, while he promotes himself as somebody who's a roots man and he's more blacker than black, and many believe that he has this vendetta about any black person who's successful and is not bowing down to him. So if he cannot control you and you're doing well and you have black skin, he doesn't like you. What do you say to that? Do you think there's any truth to that? Because St. Vincent, I grew up in St. Vincent, and I always said that I'm proud of St. Vincent that we don't have racism there. At least we did not when I was growing up. We had classism, but we really didn't go about the racial stuff. And we didn't have that issue when I was growing up. And that was many moons ago, because, I'm quite up there now. What do you say to that? Do you think there's any truth to that?
As for the racism bit, his cousin, Dougie De Freitas, said on air that one day when he was lynching E.G. Lynch in court, Dougie De Freitas was supporting Lynch. When Ralph Gonzalez called him aside and reminded him that Lynch is black nigger or something to that effect, and they are Portuguese. Okay? Secondly, for anybody to come tell me that Ralph is this, he's rootsy, I have seen many con men in my lifetime, especially those from the east end of London. Absolute con men. And Ralph is not even a good con man, but he's one.
You consider him a con artist?
He's a con artist. You will have somebody just watching you, lynching you, and at the same time put tears in his eyes. He turned up at your funeral and he put tears in. That's a con man.
Well, so are you, at this point, are you confident that victory would be had in that country, that those petitions would be heard, and that there's a good chance that they will be upheld and that democracy would be restored? Are you confident at this point about that fact?
I'm not sure about the victory, but I'm confident, especially since Tuesday, that the public will get a chance to get some insight as to some of the shenanigans that's been going on for years. I believe Adrian Fraser was the first to have, Adrian Fraser and Cleve Scott were the first two to raise the alarm. All is not well. There's some serious shenanigans going on during and at the time of our elections in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And so I'd rather not say we're going to get elections one way or the other, as long as we know that Unity Labour Party been tricking us for about 2 elections at least, and certainly for the last one.
Okay. Well, Luzette, I thank you very much for joining us on this edition of Soulful Scrutiny. I have much admiration for you as a woman. Whether people agree with your position or don't agree with your position, I think one has to acknowledge your tenacity and your determination. I think you're right. People sometimes like to put these, these titles on you, Rosa Parks or what have you. It's good to just be yourself, and to be a strong person, be strong whoever you are. And so you're certainly that. And I must commend you for standing the fort and to being a voice to many of the people in St. Vincent and the Grenadines who do not have a voice, or who is afraid to raise their voices. And I wish you much success with your fight, this movement of trying to restore democracy there. And I wish you all the very best.
I thank you so much for having me, and I want to assure you and others that I'm doing this for me first and foremost, and others after that. And I will stay for as long as it takes to get rid of this illegitimate regime. After all, they are doing wrong things, illegal things to some extent. Why can't I spend the same time doing the right thing?
The right thing. Well, thank you for joining us in this edition of Soulful Scrutiny. And we hope to see you on the next edition shortly. Thank you.